All right, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Erin Mihal, and I serve as the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at Emory University. Before we get started, I do want to share some housekeeping items with you guys. Just remember that the views and opinions expressed in the learning development webinars are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official policies, positions, or views of Emory University, the Emory Alumni Association, or their affiliates. The content provided is for information purposes only and should not be construed as an endorsement. To minimize disruptions, we do ask to please keep your microphones muted. But we do encourage you to keep your camera on. We love seeing your faces. And finally, if you have any questions at any point, feel free to drop them in the chat. Today's webinar will be in a breakout session format. So here's how it will work. Once I open the breakout room, you'll be able to choose which session you'd like to attend. We have two sessions for you guys today. The breakout room will be advocating for yourself at work with our alumni career coach, Samantha Carroll. And she'll be joined by Nicole Hollybar Walker, who is Managing Director of Alumni Association or Alumni Engagement here at Emory. And your other option would be to stay here in the main room for Building Influence Without a Title with Scott Doyne. And I will be here in the main room with you guys. At this time, I'm going to actually go ahead and give both our coaches a chance to briefly introduce themselves. And then once we start the individual sessions, they'll go a little bit more in depth. So if you guys want to tell us about your degree and your Emory journey briefly, well, you're welcome to unmute yourselves. Sam, we'll start with you.
Great. Well, thank you, Iram and Nicole, for having Scott and myself. I'm so excited for this topic today and to be here. For those who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, I went to Emory undergrad a long time ago and have stayed active with the Alumni Association. And my professional background is I've spent about 20 plus years in the communications industry. So I have spanned a couple different sectors, starting out in entertainment and media, and then going to work for a very large consulting company, doing federal change management and strategic communications work before going out on my own in 2012 and working primarily with healthcare, tech, social advocacy, and higher education. Um, so a lot of my communications work involves leadership coaching as well. And in addition to Once Upon a Brand, I started a leadership development community called Light Her Way, which is focused on leadership development, but also board readiness. Um, so I come from a more of a communications lens to share insights with the community.
Thank you. Scott?
Thanks a lot. Hi, everybody, and thanks for contributing in the chat. That's so helpful for these Zooms. I think we all learned that 5 or 6 years ago, but keep interacting, drop your LinkedIns. I had some clients say recently that they don't put their LinkedIn in these virtual webinars unless other people do. And so if you're here to network, go ahead and network. It's okay. And hopefully between Samantha and I, you learn something from us as well. I am a certified career coach, which I've been doing for the last 3 years. A lot of career transition coaching. I see some of you are going through transitions or desire a transition from an unsatisfying situation. Very common right now. I work with executives as well as emerging leaders, even students. I worked for 20 years for Turner Broadcasting is my background. So I was in sports media. I built and ran digital businesses, including NASCAR.com, NBA.com, NBA app, ran a product strategy group for a while, and then ran a research and analytics team before being laid off 3 years ago. So that's how I got here. And so I understand that life after layoff and have thankfully found my purpose and calling in this next chapter.
Thank you, Scott. All right, so once again, I'm going to go ahead open the breakout room. So if you want the topic on advocating for yourself at work, That will be in the breakout room with Samantha. And if you want building influence without a title, you'll stay here in the main room with Scott. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the room. And you should see a pop-up and be able to join the room. And if you're not able to, let me know and I can assign it to you guys. All right. So I am going to go ahead. I think Nicole should be there. Also, sorry, which room is which? Um, so Stephanie, the main room is building influence without a title. So you stay here for that. The breakout room is advocating for yourself at work. And Scott, if you want to go, you can go ahead and get started if you'd like. I'm going to go
Sure.
and mute myself.
So,
But as Scott starts, if you guys have questions, I will be monitoring the chat. So feel free to drop questions in the chat.
all right, so I'm going to get to slides in a second, and I don't want to do tons of slides, but I do want this to be practical. I want you to leave this session with something that you can apply immediately to getting ahead at work, building that influence, getting promoted, getting a new job, whatever it is. I'm going to introduce three frameworks, three exercises, and hopefully you get something from at least one of those. But if you're open to being honest or as honest as you're willing to be, I'd like you to use the chat one more time and let us know, how are you feeling about this new year? One word to describe how you're feeling about the year. I'm gonna guess it's gonna be a mix. Yeah, lots of uncertainty. Of the books I've written, about a year and a half ago, I published something called Exploring the Midlife Career Crisis, which is about my transition. And then in a couple months here, I'm going to be releasing Navigating the Quarter Life Career Crisis. So, in the research I've done for those, this uncertainty thing, which is probably like a lot of lack of control, has really increased. People feeling lost, feeling stuck, not sure what they want to do next. If they are sure what they're going to do next, it might change on them. Industry change, AI change. So just takes a deep breath every once in a while to realize we're all in this. It's not just you. And so if you're feeling a lot of chaos, a lot of change, it is very real. And so I come at this with this practical mindset to try to find some ways to come to some level of peace with that change, but also take specific action items that make you feel like, at least to the extent you have influence or control over your future, you can take some concerted steps. They might not be easy, they might be out of your comfort zone, but that's my hope for us today. So I will pull up some slides now, and thank you very much for sharing all those words, as painful or as hopeful as they might be. And it might change minute to minute or day by day. All right, I'll do a check while I keep an eye on the chat. Uh, does everybody see the slides okay? Aram, is that okay? All right.
Yes.
So went through background. Not going to waste a lot of time here. I didn't mention my Emory connection. I was in Emory 2003, Goizueta MBA. So I went to full-time business school. My background was sports TV production prior to getting my MBA. So I really wanted to get that business degree, remove any sort of ceiling from myself. And as it turned out, I also met a lot of awesome people, and that Emory brand, hopefully you're finding as well, is legit. especially in the Southeast. But as you know, I saw a lot of people that aren't in Atlanta. You're all around the country, and I think the Emory brand has grown and grown and grown, which is awesome for all of us. All right, so what are the three exercises we're going to go through? First, this word influence. When you think about what you want to have influence over, if you can use the chat for this one, what decisions do you want to influence? What is it you want to have influence over? Stakeholders. Yep, that word's going to come up later. Because to some degree, if you're thinking about you want to have more influence, and it's one of the reasons you showed up today, that takes forming an agenda. And I don't mean that to sound manipulative, but you do have to think about what it is you want. Because you might be feeling negative, you might be feeling uncertain. I had a client who said they felt lost, and this is a couple of years ago. And instead of dwelling on that lost feeling, I asked her what it would look like to feel found. And so we developed this scale called a found scale. And 1 to 10, she gradually made progress on that through a lot of experimentation. She has what I'd call a portfolio career, lots of different pieces, but experimenting with those different pieces and finding her place. It took maybe a year and a half till I remember she told me, I'm happy with this new self. So feeling lost is fine, but how do you want to feel? You want, yeah, you want your decisions to impact your work. You want people to consider your recommendations and implement them. You want to influence culture. Awesome. Those are all very, very useful for us as we look at the exercises. All right, so the three exercises are going to be types of power, which is actually something I learned while I was at Goizueta. The pie chart, and it's a different type of pie chart than you may have even seen before. And then an exercise called influence mapping. And this is a very strategic approach to accomplishing that agenda you put in the chat. So let's start with power. So when we think about influence, power to make decisions, power to have people listen to you. The first one is pretty straightforward. It's the top-down hierarchical power. And this is what we've all been used to. If you live in an org chart somewhere, the bosses are making the decisions, and the people that work under those bosses implement the decisions. And so that power comes with your position in the organization. And depending on where you are in the organization, honestly, pretty much everybody has a boss. Even CEOs have boards they report to. So it's not like anybody's immune from this type of power. And that power for yourself, while it might not be direct, you may have a team that works for you, and you may have staff, and you make hiring decisions, you may make vendor decisions or budget decisions, those sorts of things in terms of what you work on are usually determined by the bosses, quote, above you, so to speak. The second type of power is expertise. And this is one where you start to gain a little bit of an edge, or you can, regardless of where you sit in the org chart. You might be the best person at X, Y, or Z. And for me, I remember managing younger employees. Back in the day, that meant they were more versed on the internet, or they were more versed with mobile apps, or they're better versed at social media, or now it might be with AI. So, what is it you know how to do, or you understand better than most? Sometimes that means people will listen to you. It doesn't mean you go around bragging about it, and that's not necessarily everybody's favorite thing, but that IQ, your knowledge, what you are smart about. For me, a lot of times in the sports industry, I just read and digested more industry newsletters than anybody. And especially as I was running the research organization, I wanted to share that knowledge. And people, even when I did a 360-degree review, if you haven't had one of those, it's inputs from your peers, from your direct reports, from your managers. That was one thing that came back in my 360 was I just knew a lot about the industry. And so that became an advantage as bosses started building let's say, offsite presentations or annual reports, those sorts of things. Well, Scott, you know what's going on in the industry. Can you help me with this presentation? So finding that angle where you're knowledgeable about a function, about an industry, about a certain tool, um, that's something that can be part of your power dynamic. And then the last one, you might have guessed, outside of IQ, there's EQ. This is persuasive power. And this really, you see the diagram, it takes advantage of, what some people may have referred to as soft skills before. I don't love the nomenclature for that, because this can be exceptionally valuable when you're working with your peers, when you're working with stakeholders, as was mentioned, when you're working with even your manager and understanding, if you understand somebody's motivation and what they're trying to accomplish, fitting what you do for them into that path, while it might be a longer road, this takes time, absolutely. But if you're listening and you're learning and you're having the conversations with the right people, you can use your EQ to your advantage. A lot of salespeople are this way. This is part of their superpowers is they can persuade, they can influence, and it can be for a client. It also can be for internal clients. It can be for managers. So those are the three types. Does anybody have questions about those or thoughts on types of power and what's worked for you?
Yeah, I had a question in the chat. They were asking if you'll be sharing the slides afterwards, if you're able to.
Yes. Yes, I'm happy to. One of the phrases I learned early in my career was create your boss's legacy. And I do realize that gives up power, it gives up credit at some level, but it also engendered a lot of loyalty and trust. And, I did last 20 years in my company, and I'm not saying the way I did it is the right way for everybody necessarily, but that was some of the method to my madness is take a little less credit, take a little more blame, put my team out front, those sorts of things as a manager can really help. And as a employee, if you're looking to have influence, sometimes you can earn the trust of other people and they might bring you into some of those rooms that you're not in yet. Doesn't always happen. I'm not going to promise that. Not everybody is as willing a manager to share that credit or to invite you into the room. But that was one phrase that worked for me. All right. Stephen, thank you for posting this. In my previous place, I was considered someone with expertise power slash IQ and was constantly asked to supply that expertise. Stephen, if you don't mind going off mute, what was that expertise that you shared?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, in my previous place of employment, I was actually there for 15 years. I'm in the healthcare, healthcare slash informatics slash technology background, and I guess my expertise was I was considered somebody that could quote unquote talk to the IT department and could just randomly do quote unquote magic on a on a computer, and a lot of it was just any sort of things that could, it could be something as simple as formatting an Excel spreadsheet or figuring out how to get a printer to print, or going into a clinical room where a patient had accidentally knocked a computer out, where the power, even something as plugging it back in, or yeah, if it's all different, all different types of things. And it was, probably almost every single day there was there was something or another. So I kind of ended up developing this reputation for having this expertise. And then kind of what happened in my last place, my boss tried to get me, more more money and kind of more recognition that sent like a 3-page email up the food chain. And they kind of gave him this, oh, we'll give you, maybe we can come back with a 3%. And so then we kind of, made other plans. And so we had to kind of go around that. So that's kind of part of how I got to the place that I'm at now. So definitely
Okay,
recognize that expertise power.
great. Thank you very much for sharing. Any other examples that people want to share? Okay.
Can I make a comment? It can also box you in, though. It's the case with me. I am considered an expert in agile transformations, and that no longer is so attractive in the company I'm working with. So I have to, but I also have other capabilities and skill sets. But I'm concerned that I'm viewed as an agile coach and can't do much else. And it kind of boxes me in, that expertise.
Yeah, you can become a crutch.
Yeah,
That go-to person. You can get pigeonholed, right? That's another word that's
right.
used, right?
Yep.
If that's the only thing you can do, are you a, what do they call it, one-trick pony? And so this next exercise might help with some of that. And I don't want to lose this thought of what skills might be relevant. Um, Hold on, Gary has a follow-up question on the power. What type of power is most effective and sustainable? Um, I actually think persuasive power. I think that's the secret sauce. It isn't everybody's best thing though, and so I respect the fact that we all have different makeups and we all have different strengths, we all have different skills, but can we get better at them? Absolutely. Professional development, practice, trying things. But I think in the long run, persuasive power is, let's just call it AI proof as of right now. Some of those communication skills, the translation skills, even Stephen, what you were saying between departments, somebody didn't understand how something gets done, but you understood what they were even asking for. So some of that translation is a transferable skill, communication a transferable skill. If you're into analytics and insights, I hope you've learned how to communicate those insights in a way that's influential. Because if all you're doing is the back office analytics, it can become irrelevant over time. Like this is the age we're living in, and I know it can be exhausting to think about reskilling all the time. But I'm not sure there's another way. Um, Increasing persuasive power. Uh, I think mentors come in handy here. Uh, and that's one of those things that people can struggle finding a mentor, but especially if you've got people in your environment that are looking out for you. Um, I'll get to the influence map, and the influence map allows for a much more strategic approach to your agenda. So if I can get to those couple of exercises, we can regroup and see if that's a question that I've answered okay. All right, pie chart. I promised you a pie chart. PIE stands for Performance Image Exposure. Has anybody seen this or heard of this before? I can't see all the faces, unfortunately, in this view. Um, so what you might not love about this is the performance slice. Uh, I grew up in the Midwest. I was taught that if you do a good job, it's enough. And unfortunately, at least from this HR study, it can be a tree falling in the woods. And I don't want your effort to go to waste. I don't want you to, not be heard, not be listened to, not be asked your opinion on things. If you do a good job, it is obviously important to do a good job based on whoever's criteria. But this image and exposure are going to be important to be seen and to be influential over time. It's sort of like marketing, and it is weird to think of ourselves as brands or products or services. But if there's a great product out there, without that sort of viral word of mouth exposure, nobody's going to know it exists. even on books you read, shows you watch, um, shoes you like to run in, whatever those things are. There's a reason that marketing exists, and I ask you to consider what your marketing plan is for yourself. And it doesn't mean you can't be yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be somebody that brags or a jerk or an asshole. But when we go through this, I'm going to give you some tips on this in terms of what it looks like to make progress on these. So, like I said, performance can be the price of entry. It does build reputation. What people think about the work you've done is important. I'm not saying it's not, but you can make it even more powerful by other people knowing it exists. Image does have to do with how you show up. I really, really don't like the term executive presence. I think it's a BS term that masks some, at least bias, if not stronger than that. But presence, in terms of how you show up in the culture or environment that you're trying to be impactful, is important. How you show up to an interview, what are you wearing? How do you frame your questions? How do you answer those? What questions are you asking at the end of the interview? So, in terms of improving this image, to follow up on the question about how to improve, you can ask for feedback and give permission for honesty. It doesn't mean you're going to like what you hear. It doesn't even mean what you hear is accurate, but 360 review or your mid-year annual performance review, getting your peers or your stakeholders feedback and those things being included in your review, that can be a way that you grow your self-awareness at least. How am I perceived? Because you might think one thing and it's something else, and it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just there are growth areas. Or on the plus side, if you ask people at the end of the year, what is it I did this year that you thought was really helpful, was really impactful, that was a really good project? You might be surprised what they tell you. And if that's a strength you're less aware of, then it's something that you can lean into. It's something that you can share and let more people know you have because there's some level of internal, external demand. Anne Murray, does this apply to the tech startup environment? I think the biggest difference in the startup environment is how many hats you have to wear. It's usually a small team, lots of roles for each person, very little structure and process. So when it comes to building your image internally, there's fewer people to influence, honestly. And so, you know, I can't help but say first impressions matter, but also consistency matters. When you think about brand consistency, and let's say a restaurant changes a food item. I remember Chipotle changed their salsa at one point. It was just terrible. That can really affect how people think about your brand. So again, not to exhaust you, but brand consistency, performance consistency is something where you're building that reputation. More people know about it. All right, so exposure. One of the things, it's actually not listed here, is in larger companies, they have employee resource groups. And I've seen this a lot with younger employees, is yes, you might not be in a leadership role per se, but if you're part of a business resource group or employee resource group of Latinos or women or what have you, you can take a leadership role within that organization. It might remind you a little bit about clubs in college or even high school. How do you get that leadership role? There was a young employee group at Turner, and they had this innovation contest every year, and I got to be a judge, evaluating different startup or new business ideas. And as a result, I interfaced with the leaders of that club or that ERG, and I didn't know necessarily that finance or accounting person was really good with presentation skills or was really good with collaboration or was really good in building consensus. So finding those odd projects, task forces, there definitely is a threat to DEI per se, and I hope they do not disappear. I got a lot of value from interacting with those groups. And in that case, right, if we call it what it is, what else is available? Is there a special project? Is there a new business idea? Is there a contest or competition going on? Is there a hackathon happening? All those things, I realize it's going to take your time, and you only have so much time. You might have a very full life. You might have kids. You might have hobbies. You might have volunteering you do. All that stuff's important, but if what you're trying to figure out is how do I have some influence, if you find your way into one of those project teams, into one of those ERG leadership teams, you might have a chance to be seen in a different light. In that way, people see your potential. It's not just about what you've done, but what you're capable of. Um, I like the internal networking as much as external networking. If you're in a company you do enjoy and want to grow within, that's awesome. It's very hard out there for people going through job transition, know that very well. But if you like your company and you want to stay in it, what does your coffee chat schedule look like? What does your Zoom schedule look like for people in outer offices? Are there people in roles that are similar to yours, but maybe a little bit different? Instead of, I remember advertising sales versus distribution sales. Those groups didn't always talk to each other in my company, but lower level employees or any employees, if you want to learn more about what's going on or what career options exist for you, if somebody else reached out to you to learn more about what you do, I'm guessing you'd probably say okay. And so while you might not want to leave your job or go into a different company or a different industry, there's some internal networking to be done. And sometimes it's looking for people that have similar roles in other divisions, or just something you're curious about. Because if you're networking with curiosity, it's less about proving yourself or bragging. It's really just you want to learn more about it. And if that's genuine, I think people sense that. And so finding a way that not only your performance is impactful and consistent, that you show up in the way that you want people to perceive you, and getting some exposure through some of these creative options. Hopefully, some of those things, or at least one of those things, is something you're willing to give it a shot and can make an impact on your influence. All right, I'll pause here. Did I miss anything else in the chat on Pi before we go to influence mapping? Um, okay, Kate, this is a really interesting point. Uh, People's performance might not even be awesome, but their image and exposure overcomes it. Um, that's real. And you see that 60% and the 30% is like, well, if that adds up and your work is good enough, those relationships could be more valued. Does it suck? Sure. It's not necessarily fair. But what do you control here? And, for me, I know it's easy to be dissatisfied and complain, and I don't fault people for it, but I try to work with my clients to figure out, okay, what is it you can do? What is it you can control? What is it you can learn from that you're willing to try yourself? Now, maybe it's outside of your own integrity and ethics, and that's totally cool. Like I would never ask anybody to blur those lines. But is there something you can learn from those people you do see advancing that is within your control? Some of it's not, but is there something you can do? All right, influence mapping. This is really starting with an objective. You have to decide something you want to accomplish that you're struggling with. It could be getting budget, it could be getting a project approved, it could be getting promoted. I'm going to use that as the example today, um, as an objective of getting a promotion. And this, more often than not, you've got a linear thought process. My manager has to approve it, their department head, the CEO, whatever the chain of command might look like. And, the direct path seems logical. It makes a lot of sense. Those are the people you have to have the support of. But I want to ask you to consider a different option. I want you to think about this exposure and image enhancement. I want you to think about that persuasive power. You brought up stakeholders earlier. So think about some other people that are on this chessboard, if you will. right? It's not just the people that are directly above you that can be, they might be the deciders, but you may have other people that can influence those deciders. And so instead of that straight path, I want you to consider this path that's it's a little wonky, it's a little all over the place, but if you think about it practically, can I talk to a high profile client, internal or external, where they're willing to endorse me? What role do human resources and finance have on promotions? A lot. And maybe you can learn something from them. If you've seen people getting promoted or you just want to understand that, that can be a coffee chat sometime. What's going on with hiring these days? What's going on with promotions? What are the skills the management team is looking for? Human resources, and in the best light, they can be your partner. I know it's not always that way. Finance absolutely has power in this situation. When we go back to power, there's some hierarchical power with finance and HR. So, what relationships can you form? I don't want this to come across manipulative. There is a fine line between manipulation and strategy. I understand that. It's really just sort of thinking through, taking that step back. If I want to accomplish this objective, who else is on the chessboard? Are there stakeholders love your work? They really, you know, can't do what they do without you. If you're on the marketing team and the sales team loves you, more people need to know about that. And maybe they're willing to go to bat for you. Maybe it's explicit, maybe it's implicit, maybe it's a little more, um, I think, implied sometimes, where it's actually that salesperson that invites you as the marketing person to be in a certain meeting, right? There's some lateral power that happens in a move like that, right? Can I join that meeting? Can I go on that trip? Can I attend this conference? Maybe one of your advocates can help you increase your image or your exposure. And so this is just one other way of thinking about it. Hillary, awesome question. I love a challenge. Can I talk through this exercise for getting a certain job? Influence mapping. I'm going to ask the group. You got a lot of people in here. Some are job searching, some aren't. When you think about influence mapping for getting a new job, who else might be on that chessboard besides the hiring manager? Board of directors. There you go. Go to the top. Other people in the company in similar roles, people that already do the job, hiring manager, references, alumni network, uh, everyone. HR and recruiting, I think this goes different ways. And I don't know if we have talent acquisition folks on the call. In some cases, they are checking a box when you're doing that recruiter call. They're just making sure you checked off the things on the job description. Sometimes they have influence. Sometimes they are what I call the CEO whisperer. So that's one other topic I want to raise. Everybody has a whisperer. I bet you have a whisperer. Who are the people whose judgment you trust? If you're hiring people, whose opinion matters to you? If um, if there's somebody that wants to get budget for something, whose opinion matters that might be using that tool or service? Uh, I think we're all accustomed to this because we can have blind spots, but there are people we trust. And so when I think about this influence map, and it might be the green circles or the orange circles, who does that department head listen to? Might be a good question to ask yourself. And it might be somebody that's not even in one of these formal roles. Chief of staff has become this role that's grown a lot in the last few years. There might be a chief of staff that has the ear of a decider. It might be a consultant externally that has the ear of the decider. So if you can identify influencers, connectors, outside of the deciders, now you can think about how you might want to approach it. This is a strategic process that allows you to take a step back, not jump in too fast, and act or react. This is a considered methodical approach to influence, either in your role trying to have influence, or if you're looking for a job, finding a way to have influence. I've seen a lot more job candidates with their own websites, PowerPoints, slides, case studies, because what you're doing there is showing evidence of your skills. It's not just the 2D resume. You can show off your work, I think has some influence. And if the right person sees that, they can tell the hiring manager, not only do I know somebody, look at what they did. And so there's a combination of factors involved here that can really help bolster your case. Uh, I can go on and on about LinkedIn forever, uh, but I will say recently, LinkedIn DMs have been less responsive. And so, to some degree, if you can get people's email addresses, and I'm not above finding email addresses or company email, um, forms. I had my students teach me this. Actually, there's something called Apollo or Rocket Reach or something. You can find company email format, and I'm not above reaching out to people that way if LinkedIn isn't successful. All right. Thank you for that, Aram. All right. So I'm going to put a pin in this and just start to recap a little bit. And I would love for folks to share something they learned today. Does anybody want to talk about something that jumped out to them that they're interested in looking into more or maybe even trying?
Hey Scott, sorry, autocorrect changed my thing. I was asking, is it important to
Oh,
build
is
a
it
portfolio?
important to build a
Yeah.
portfolio? Um, I think yes. That's sort of what I was alluding to with LinkedIn is whether it's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, wherever, the platform always controls reach. So if you're putting content in those places, there's no guarantee anybody sees it. So, um, there are email spam filters as well. So you have to sort of be careful with that and approach things professionally. But websites are just so easy to build now. I just launched my new one off of GoDaddy. Wix and Squarespace are super easy. It costs a little bit of money, but there's also free one-page versions. And so getting something out there that adds to your credibility, your image, if you can let people know that exists, it might impress them in a different way. All right, so of the three exercises, the types of power, the pie or influence map, um, which one did you guys think might be useful for you? Okay, Lena. Lena, do you mind sharing a little bit more about why the pie chart might be helpful?
Yeah, so for me, I'm Colombian. So the background that I have is my parents kind of instilling a work ethic of just like working really hard, but not really saying that you work really hard, just doing the work. And so kind of realizing that like I should probably be saying more of the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, it's absolutely cultural. I'm associated with a coaching company, and they have something called the Latino Career Assessment. You might actually want to take it. They have a free version. Send me a note or schedule
Yeah,
time with me, because it actually looks at those cultural norms and how they might not be serving you in your professional capacity.
yeah,
Risk
that'd be
tolerance
great.
is another one, right? Speaking up in meetings. It's just not as natural. And in some cases, I don't mean this about you, in some cases, you've been taught that asking for help is a weakness. This is a real specific cultural one I've learned about through my research. And so finding a way that you're a little more comfortable asking for help, maybe in private, but I'm not sure how else you're supposed to learn, honestly. And so speaking up, taking risks, being innovative, I can understand the concern and anxiety that goes with that, but finding a way to try it out. It doesn't mean you have to, be Johnny Loudmouth, but in your own way, finding a way to get comfortable with your voice. There was another one on pie. Sophia, what are you thinking? And if you're not comfortable, that's also cool. Uh, Yamariam, what did you think about the pie chart?
I thought it was interesting, like it is true, like I reflect a lot about who I know and who I trust, and it's really the people that I'm exposed to. Um, and so I thought like I never applied that to myself as like a method, but I after seeing the pie chart, I kind of looked back and that was kind of the most important thing. So I thought it's nice that the pie chart captured that.
Good. Yeah, these are simple models. They're not perfect science, but it's to get you thinking a little bit differently, um, and maybe trying something out. Um,
Yeah.
lost to found scale, Kate. So the way professional coaching works is, through the certification process I went through, we learn lots of different tools and skills, and a lot of it's very psychological. And it's some of the neuroscience behind it I even find like even more fascinating. When it comes to reframing, if you're feeling lost, it doesn't do me much good to get into the details of why. The way we approach things is, well, how do you want to feel? And if it is found, you develop that definition yourself. And so let's say you're a 3 on the found scale. I'd ask you, where are you on the found scale? And you want to be a 6. Well, what might you do? What are some options? What are some ideas of how you might feel more found? In that way, we come up with a list of ideas, none of which I'm like committing you to. You're not writing them in stone. It's just a list of ideas for how to become found. And it could be assessments, it could be talking to people, it could be learning a new skill, it could be taking a break and reading a book. Whatever those ways you might become found are, at the end of that coaching session, you would decide on the most valuable action item for you and what might help you pursue that, what might distract you from that, what other help or contingency plan do you have to make sure you accomplish that. So it's really a process within coaching of identifying your definition of found, some options for how to pursue it, and then choosing one step that might be valuable towards that goal. Shamara wants to see the pie chart. Okay. Ah, oh, this is gonna kill me. I got all these animations. Uh, and I will give a version of this to Aram to send out. Shamar, is that enough, or did you want to see the table?
Nope, that works. I do have kind of a comment slash question about the performance piece. I noticed just, going through my career, the things that I'm rated on as far as performance have changed drastically from being a staff person to getting to, management and leadership. And leaders, their performance is a lot more like, how well are you able to motivate your staff and things like that versus, how well can you analyze data that's been collected. So when I think about that small piece of performance for leadership, I feel like it's maybe a lot more than 10% because it has, much more of that, the soft skills that you're talking about. So I'm just wondering how this pie chart kind of shifts over time with kind of ascension and responsibilities.
It's a really good question. Um, My gut reaction is it's the same, but I want to back that up. So I went from intern to SVP at Turner over 20 years. So I lived through every level, and I only know my own experience, but I can also think through my staff, my employees, my peers, or even my clients today. Um, it sort of goes back to that everybody has a boss thing. And while there might be some momentum, I think that's possible. I think your reputation can have some momentum. You might have leverage at different times. Like, let's say you've launched a project and it's gone really well, and you get the valuable feedback. That might be one of those moments to ask for something. Or, when it comes to external exposure, promote that accomplishment on LinkedIn, let's say. And maybe it's not your style to brag about yourself, but you want to brag about your team and at least let people know your team accomplished this thing, whether it was an award or a big project or a big milestone. I don't know that that exposure thing ever really goes away if what you're looking for is long-term success. I'm still working on this myself as an entrepreneur. I'm joining boards, and mostly because I'm very passionate about the causes, but I'm not going to pretend that me saying I'm on a board doesn't add to my credibility in some way, or it doesn't tell people the type of person or coach that I am. So I don't think it goes away, for better or worse. That's my opinion. Anybody else have opinions on that? You all have your own careers of experience. Sophia, hello. How are you?
Hey, I'm so sorry when you called me up earlier. So with this pie chart, what strikes me is how disproportionate the performance versus image versus exposure seems from the outset. However, it makes sense in the way that performance can be limited to your own scale, whether or not it's just you and a team versus you and the public face of the company.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was pretty helpful in giving me some better reference of how it would work in terms of publicizing, networking, building bonds across fields. So
Good. Thank you for sharing that.
thanks.
I like the debate. I like the discussion of it. This is not scientific. It's more just to shock you a little bit. I think it's true, but I don't want you to walk out of here without some new idea that is worth at least thinking about. Um, hey Phil, how you doing? You've been on my screen the whole time. What do you think about what we went through today?
Well, I had seen this pie chart before, something similar to it, so that was not new, but I did like the influence mapping.
Mm,
Had never really thought about putting all the decision makers on one page. I think that's actually a really good idea. One of the things that, for my personal situation right now is I was at a company for a long time, uh, we got bought by private equity, and we all know what happens with private equity at times. So I got my department, the legal department, got downsized. I got let go. Um, and these items, these models that you've shown here, all seem to be geared towards internal moves, influencing your manager, the people within your company. How would they apply it for a person in my situation where I'm trying, uh, trying to find a new position at a new company and figuring out how to, uh, you not just to get the job in the first place. And then I can see how these models would apply once you're there.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And based on the topic today, I focused a little bit more on influence without a
Sure.
title. I got dozens more exercises, but I think the networking piece is probably the most common, whether it's internal networking or external networking.
Mhm.
And I focus on that because I think it's the biggest influence on getting jobs. As I talk to my clients and they land, hopefully after not too much time, I go back and ask them, what do you think was in your control that affected you landing this job? And 99 times out of 100, they know somebody. And,
Mhm.
you know, you hear it all the time. People talk about the importance of networking. We all know it. I've got ways of helping people get comfortable with it in their own way. But I think when it comes to influence, that image and exposure is absolutely relevant externally. Who are your core network, right? Those people that they're already your advocates, people that have maybe engaged with your posts or maybe left you a recommendation or wrote you a nice review in the past. That's, sort of your first ring. There's a concept, I think it was a Stanford professor that talked about it first, but it's also in a new book called Defining Decade. It's called Weak Ties, and this is something that's come up a lot, which is it's that second ring of contacts that are going to be the most influential. Because the first ring, you're sort of making the sausage with, and you're discussing what you might want to do, and you give them some level of direction. And then if they introduce you to somebody, it's an implied endorsement and it's more focused. And so getting to that second level, I think, requires a level of articulation about yourself, your skills, and your strengths, and a willingness to share that with your first degree connections so that you can get to that second ring where the hiring actually happens.
Okay.
All right, we've had some amazing questions. We have our friends from the other room rejoining us. We're at 12:59, so for the sake of time, we're gonna have to wrap it up. Let's see. I think Samantha's letting someone finish because she's still in the other room. But you will get, as soon as we end the meeting, you'll get a survey that pops up on your screen. Please fill it out for us. It's very quick, very short. We do listen to your feedback and we tailor our programs based on that feedback. So it's not something you do and then it gets ignored. So please take a few minutes to do that. I definitely want to thank Scott and Samantha. I think Samantha might still be in the other room. Oh, no, here she is.
Can
Let
you
me
see
get
me?
her up here. Yes. All right. I would definitely want to thank both of you guys for your time and great information. Unfortunately, we could not get the recording to work in Samantha's room, but we were able to record Scott's session, so we will share that with you. And Scott's will be sharing the slides that he provided. And Samantha, if you have any resources that you want to share, I'll share that with the group afterwards also, of course. And we'll have the contact information for both our coaches in a follow-up email, so you'll be able to get in touch with them individually and if you have further questions for either of them. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we will see you guys next time. Our next session is next month, February 10th, and it is real talk on moving forward through grit, moving forward in your career journey with grit. So we hope to see you guys there, and have a great day, everyone.